Yeah, and then it's like
Maybe
a
not
half
sitting
time.
there.
Oh, it doesn't.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. We're now live.
1 second, please. 353. Right, thank you.
Welcome everyone to this ordinary meeting of the Pyrenees Shire Council, 15th of August 2022. As meeting chair, I give my consent for this open council meeting to be streamed live, recorded, published online. Anyone who is invited to read out a question or a presentation will be recorded, and their voice, image or comments will form part of the live stream and recording. The Chair and the CEO have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of the debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. The stream will stop prior to the closed section of the meeting and will recommence for the conclusion of the meeting. The public is able to view this live stream via our website, www.pyrenees.vic.gov.au. Should technical issues prevent the continuation of the stream, a recording will be made available on our website. And I'd like to apologise to anybody who was here on time. We were having some technical issues, but we are now with you. The opening prayer. Heavenly Father, we ask you to give your blessing to this council, direct and prosper its deliberations to the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of the Pyrenees Shire. Amen. We acknowledge the people past and present of the Wadawurrung, Dja Dja Wurrung and Eastern Maar and Watchabollock tribes, whose land forms the Pyrenees Shire. We pay our respect to the customs, traditions and stewardship of the land by the elders and people of these tribes on whose land we meet today. As we're all here, there are no apologies. Are there any notices of disclosure of interest by council or councillors or officers? None declared. Thank you. I now call for confirmation of the previous minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 15th of February, the closed meeting held on the 15th of February, the special meeting held on the 1st of March, and the closed meeting held on the 1st of March, as previously. Moved Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Vance. All those in favour? Carried. Is there any?
Mr. Mayor, or would you mind just, calling the curtains closed? It's kind of a bit dazzling over this side, like a rabbit in the headlights. Thank you.
You feel comfortable now?
Much
Councillor
better.
Clark?
Yeah, I can actually see everybody else now.
Is there any business arising from those minutes? Nothing. Thank you very much. We now come to the public participation section of the meeting. There are a few questions on notice, which will be handled first, and then there will be a public submission after the questions. Members of the public are encouraged to ask questions of council at ordinary council meetings. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person to verbally ask a question. All attendees are required to register by midday on the day of the meeting to ensure council adheres to the number of attendees permitted under its COVID-safe plan. Members of the public who are unable to attend in person can participate in question time by submitting their questions in writing, either online through council's website, by mail or hand delivered. The person can ask a maximum of 2 questions at any one meeting on any topic, and the question and responses shall not exceed 5 minutes. Questions are to be received by 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Questions are read by the chairperson during public participation. The chairperson or councillor or council officer to whom the question is referred may immediately answer the question or take the question on notice for the next ordinary meeting. Public submissions. Members of the public may present a submission to council in the period immediately following public question time. Members of the public may attend the meeting in person to verbally make the submission. All attendees must register by midday of the day of the meeting to ensure council adheres to its COVID-safe plan. Members of the public who are unable to attend in person to make a submission on an agenda item may do so in writing, either through council's website, by mail or hand delivered. The chair will allocate a maximum of 5 minutes to each person who wishes to address council. Submissions are to be received by 12 noon on the day of the meeting. There will be no discussion or debate with the public attendee. However, councillors may ask questions for clarification of the attendees. Our first question for the evening comes from Mr. Ian Murdoch from Carnham. In early October 2021, I presented a petition which was delivered to council in the October 19th general meeting. Council directed the CEO, Jim Nolan, for a response, which he duly provided to council in the November 16th general meeting. I was heartened to see via YouTube streaming council's concerned response, including the mentioned Councillor Keogh and Clark's responses. As per minute item 13.4.3, I was further heartened by personal exchanges between councillors Keogh and Clark and CEO Jim Nolan and others at the December 7th cuppa at Snake Valley Community Hall. Despite council's declared intent to seek the views of the author of the petition regarding an intended review of council's community engagement practices, I'm left wondering when I can be expected to be contacted regarding this proposed action. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to answer Mr. Murdoch's questions. I think it is in two parts, so I'll allow you to read the second question. But just in respect of that, Mr. Murdoch, thank you for raising this again. And council has committed to seek the views of the author of the petition that came before council, and we'll undertake someone to get in touch with you within the next 2 weeks to do that. And I'll now ask the next part of the question, Mr. Mayor.
Question 2 from Mr. Murdoch. Now, 4 months after the council's resolution, I begin to doubt the currency of council's concern. What does council consider a reasonable period of time for a ratepayer to wait for council to advise, acknowledge, pledge, or enact a considered and affirmed action? And how does council feel that such a delay promises ratepayers a diligent and probing review? Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in response to Mr. Murdoch's question, I guess the first thing to understand is that any resolution of council is appropriately recorded, tracked and monitored until it's properly enacted. And so, that is important to acknowledge. It's also important in respect of timeliness, that timeliness and the timelines really depend on a number of factors. I guess the first factor is the nature of the matter that's being responded to. And some of the considerations there relate to whether or not there's in fact a time frame provided by council, whether the matter is a safety matter, a matter of community safety, whether it's a matter of legal compliance, or whether it's a matter that impacts significantly on council services. And obviously, the priorities that are given in terms of the timeliness of these responses do have regard to those issues. And the second thing is that it does have regard to the resources and the capacity of the organisation to respond to those things. And in respect of that, that matter, there are a couple of matters to consider, and I guess I refer, Mr. Mayor, to a report that's on the agenda today, which relates to service reviews. Now, service reviews are considered really important by this council, and council has a range of services to review, and our service review program actually looks at in a comprehensive way across all our service areas over approximately a 10-year period. Now, it'd be nice to be able to undertake those reviews in a more timely way, but in fact, it does have regard to the fact that to undertake these reviews, we are limited by the resources that we have. So this component of community engagement and seeking the views of the community around how council engages with the public is part of the Corporate Services Governance, Risk and Compliance Review, which is listed in that report that I've referred to, which is item 10.1.3 in the agenda. And that's to be undertaken during the period of 2022 and 2023. Now, that process has already commenced, and in February of this year, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Bramall put a report to Council around community engagement policy and strategy, and Council resolved to approve the process to undertake that, that engagement to enable the members of the community to have input into how we engage. And the first part of that has already commenced with the communications piece of work, which is part of the engagement task, and the use of the council engagement hub on our website, seek views of the community. So the matter in respect of what Mr. Murdoch is seeking in terms of reference to what does council feel promises ratepayers a diligent and probing review. Of course, the council is taking this matter very seriously, where it's not something that can be undertaken in a short period of time, and it does involve engaging with a broad-ranging part of the community, and council is committed to do that, and we report openly to the community about that through the council reports, which was evident in the report in February. So, Mr. Mayor, just in response to that question, then in summary, the timeliness does have to do with the nature of what is being sought on the one hand, and the capacity of the organisation to deal with it on the other. But timeliness is an important factor, and it's one that we're very mindful of. Under the Local Government Act, I, as the CEO, have a responsibility to ensure the actions of council are enacted in a timely way, and that's the undertaking that I give and that I'm responsible for. And this is a matter that we do take seriously, and we will and will continue to do so, not only in respect of the engagement policy and engagement strategy, but in respect of any of the council resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Our second questioner is Mr. Trevor Davey. Does the council have a dress code for employees? And if so, is there a standard of cleanliness and appearance on council workers? Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'm pleased to say that council does have a uniform policy, and that uniform policy does set out a dress code for staff and the expectations of staff in respect of the wearing of that uniform, and also those dress standards that relate to it. The uniform is appropriate to the nature of the work that's being done. So in respect of indoor staff, for example, uniform is non-compulsory. In respect of our outdoor staff, the uniform forms part of their personal protective equipment, and it is compulsory. And then there are other work areas such as our community care support staff, our community safety and amenity officers who have a combination of indoor and outdoor activities. The uniform and dress code is designed in a way that's appropriate for the nature of the work that's been undertaken. Council does provide an allowance for staff to be able to purchase uniform. And that varies depending on the nature of the work, whether it's full-time or part-time work. And annually we have a fitting day when staff are able to replenish their clothes, their uniforms that have either worn or need to be replaced. So it is a matter that we do take seriously, and we do take pride in how we present ourselves to the community. Certainly, if Mr. Davey has an issue with a specific employee or an issue that he'd like to follow up further, Mr. Gowans or myself will be very happy to talk to you about that specific issue, and we'll and if it's a concern, we'll certainly make sure it's addressed. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Our last question this evening is from Neville Grills from Landsborough. Thanks for the answer from Mr. Douglas Gowans at the February meeting regarding land management plans. I'm pleased to hear that the council sees that land management plan forms an important part of a planning application, and adherence by the applicant is checked by the council. Can the council please provide statistics on planning applications that included land management plans and the number that have checked for adherence and their outcomes? My experience in this area is that 100% of land management plans have not even started. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Grills, for your follow-up question from our February meeting. As stated in the February meeting, Council sees land management plans as a very important part of certain applications, and often those applications relate to land activities where the activity being sought or the permit being sought may not be entirely congruent with the underlying land use. So they're not used in every planning application, but in the planning applications where they are used, council officers take what's in the land management plan very seriously, because it helps form the position of council officers and potentially council on what is intended for the use of the land in a particular location. I'm not sure I can readily give Mr. Grills a plan-by-plan statistic on how many land management plans are used per application. That would use a fair bit of officer time, and I'm not sure that's the greatest use of officer time. However, I can state that council does check on adherence, and generally would be doing that checking on adherence if there was a concern that a land management plan wasn't being adhered to and impacting the amenity of someone's neighbouring experience. Council would absolutely undertake that check, because it is, as stated in our previous meeting, it is really important what's in that land management plan is being adhered to by the applicant. And I would dispute that. I understand that Mr. Grills has an experience of land management plans not being started, but what I can say is that council officers have in the past checked land management plans, and there is compliance to them. So I would not agree with the statement that Mr. Grills has put forward.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. We now have a public submission with regards to the Old Beaufort Primary School from Ms. Philippa Hedges, who is coming into the meeting virtually. Philippa, thank you very much for your patience this evening. Please go ahead with your submission.
This submission is by the Old Beaufort Primary School Committee regarding its recent community petition. We'd like to acknowledge the Beaufort Service Group's assistance with financing this community work, which was undertaken by our committee with support from other community members. The business case was available to the public alongside the petition, And please note that we are now referring to the social enterprise plan as our business case. And we've provided councillors with a copy of the business case updated in March 2022. The petition was distributed throughout the Shire and beyond. There were two formats: a paper petition that was placed in various shops around Beaufort and in Lexington, and the electronic petition, which was distributed via social media, mainly via our Facebook page, Save Beaufort PS60 for a Community Hub. People set up stalls in various locations down the street and at the Beaufort Market and at the Truck and Car Show. There was also a mail drop to 600 Beaufort residents and 500 Avoca residents. All in all, there were multiple ways to participate, and even for people with limited mobility. So even though the petition was only open for 3 weeks, we feel that it really allowed quite a comprehensive consultation and discussion, although we acknowledge that we weren't able to reach everyone in the Shire. So the final tally, there was an overwhelmingly positive response to the plan to have the site retained as a community asset and for the heritage buildings to be repurposed as a community hub, with Beaufort Community House and Learning Centre as the primary tenant, moving their operations into the main school building. Likewise, the social media engagement was really positive, with the main complaint being that those people living outside Victoria weren't able to sign the petition. So the total number of petition signatures was 2,283, with 1,775 paper signatures and 508 electronic. It was tabled in Parliament on the 8th of the 3rd. So both petitions were presented to the Legislative Assembly by Louise Staley, MP for Ripon, last Tuesday. And on Thursday, Danielle Green, Parliamentary Secretary for Regional Victoria, asked for an adjournment to talk about the former school site as presenting a great opportunity for a community hub. And also she talked about Martha Haley, the ALP candidate, advocating for this outcome. Danielle talked about organising a site visit with the committee, Martha Haylett and Anthony Carbines, the Minister responsible for Neighbourhood Houses Victoria. And our committee, along with Councillor Ferrari, met Martha and showed her around the site on February the 4th of March. And we'd also like to invite Councillor Ferrari to the site visit with Minister Carbines. So in terms of political advocacy, we recognise that to secure funding for the site, we've firstly got to secure the actual site for the community. So now that the petition's been tabled, our next step is to write to the relevant ministers, including Tim Pallas, Jarla Pulford, Mary-Ann Thomas, Anthony Carbines, and we're hoping that the council will also write to these ministers requesting the support for the project. So the outcomes from the community consultation are really that we need to form some working parties. So in terms of youth, what's emerged from communities discussions is a consensus around the need for a youth space in Beaufort. Several committees in our community are already discussing this very topic. So while we are allocating space, so within a building and an external area as well to be developed maybe for basketball, netball courts and volleyball courts, etc. The next step though is to form a working party for youth to help grow the youth vision. Sharon, would you like to just speak about that?
Okay. I'd like to just to add.
Sharon. Sharon.
Okay. I'd like to add that a signature on the paper petition represents a valued conversation that showed enthusiastic support for the project. Excuse me. The overall impression from having these many conversations was an overwhelming sense of the support. One of the reoccurring themes coming out of this face-to-face community engagement was the need for a youth space, which really reinforces our business case for including the youth space and youth programs. This need was highlighted to me last week at a Girl Guide meeting when I was discussing the community hub with a 16-year-old girl. When I mentioned a youth space on the school, I immediately saw a real engagement, and thinking that she was going to mention an area and be enthusiastic for games, sport, other activities, I was actually very shocked to hear her say that we need headspace there. This also highlights the fact that youth have definite ideas about what they need, and this may be very different from our ideas of what is needed. To think that this is the first thing that came to her mind, the need for mental health services, is very concerning and really needs to be addressed.
The other thing that came out of the consultation was the need for a management structure, for us to think about that. Many people offered their expertise in taking the project forward through the petition process. And we acknowledged Council's recommendation back in March 2020 to establish an entity to manage the development of the site into the future. Now that the petition's finalised, we'll establish a working party and start the process of researching the most appropriate community legal entity for the community hub. So what we want to do is examine the detail of what other community hubs have done, for example, at Wedderburn and Rainbow, Clunes and Creswick, many places, and learn from them. And the working party will consist of a couple of members of the Old Beaufort Primary School Committee who will co-opt others with necessary skills. And we also want to invite Councillor Ferrari to be in this working party so that we have a really close working relationship with Council to determine the most appropriate structure. And it's also important to note that we really see the setting up of a maintenance fund as an essential part of a community management body. So not only will this guarantee finance for future works, but it will substantially alleviate any risk to Council for having to maintain community hub assets. So we really want to work closely with Council, with the CEO and with Councillor Ferrari, with regular updates on our progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippa. Thank you, Sharon and George. Appreciate your submission this evening.
I'll leave a copy with everybody if there's no questions.
Any questions? No. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to try.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Just a minute.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thanks, Philippa.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Councillors, item 10, items for noting. Are there any?
Happy to move.
Move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. Any questions, discussion? All those in favour? Carried. Gotta get them. Item 13.1, economic development and tourism. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council support for sponsorship for the Pyrenees Unearthed Festival. And the report outlines some of the history associated with Council's involvement with Pyrenees wine makers, Pyrenees grape growers and winemakers' efforts around growing the visitor economy through wine tourism. This event has continued to grow and it's gone from strength to strength. In 2019, Council approved $6,500 per annum as sponsorship per year over 3 years to support the Pyrenees Unearthed Festival. Happy to say that crowd numbers have continued to grow, and the last event, ticket numbers were capped at 1,000 people, growing from just a few hundred previously. The purpose of the event really is to showcase the region and the product that's grown from the region for around 20 wineries in the Pyrenees and Grampians wine region, and allow them to build on their wine club lists with local food entities, entertainers, making a variety of food, beverages and entertainment. So, Mr. Mayor, the rest of the report is there for your background and reference, and I make the recommendation in conclusion that Council approves sponsorship support for $6,500 per annum over a term of 3 years for the Pyrenees Unearthed Festival, subject to Council's usual sponsorship terms and conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Moved to Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Ferrari. Anything, Councillor Vance?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is an ongoing sponsorship that we've had over a good many years, and as we all know, the Vignerons are one of our flagships, bringing people and hopefully new residents, as well as those that savour the flavour of our wine that's produced in the Pyrenees. And I see we get great value out of this sponsorship, and I'm more than happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrari?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just reiterate Councillor Vance's comments, and I think it's just a way to, again, to show our appreciation for the work that those wineries do, and the attraction in tourism and the economic money and support that they bring into the community. So I think it's a twofold thing to support them in their future endeavours, and also to in some way thank them for the work they do and the business and trade they bring into our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? All those in favour? Carried. 13.1.2 Economic Development Update. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is prepared by Mr. Ray Davies, the Economic Development and Tourism Manager. And the purpose of this report principally is to provide Council with an update of some of the economic development activities that have been occurring across the Shire. I won't talk to them in detail, but simply refer to them for the benefit of the members of the community that are watching this council meeting. First is a grant application under the Enabling Tourism Fund. And in respect of this item, Mr. Mayor, council support is sought for the to endorse an application that's been made under that Enabling Tourism Fund for a Cycle Pyrenees master plan to be prepared to build on the tourism product that's available to visitors in the region. And that master plan is estimated to be $60,000, so a grant of $48,000 has been sought with a council contribution requirement of $12,000 over 2 financial years. The second item referenced in this report is the North East Pyrenees Pipeline Project, and this one has been reported to council a number of times previously, and so there is an update there for council. Right at the moment, there is an application pending with the state government for funding of $300,000 for a business case to be prepared for that project, which essentially was initiated by the Natty Alec Landcare Group and a number of landholders in that area for a secure water supply that will enable that part of our economy to grow. And it's a significant economic generator that's been identified, so it's a high priority project for council. The next is the Integrated Water Management project, which is both a closed loop water recycle project, and the community be well aware of this because it's a work in progress. The pipeline is being constructed as we speak, and this will provide a secure water supply for the Goldfields Recreation Reserve and the Beaufort Golf Club into the future using recycled wastewater from Beaufort. The Business Concierge program is a state government funded program, and we have an officer engaged with our small businesses to provide support across a range of business activities, including their ability to be able to manage the issues associated with COVID-19. Tourism and events, certainly the last couple of months been a big period for events in the Pyrenees, and the next couple are likely to be the same. The Kickstarting Events has been a state-funded initiative of $30,000 to support a range of events, and a number of those are currently in progress. The Beaufort Golf and Brass Club's Brass on the Grass event is scheduled for coming weeks, and the Avoca Community Arts and Garden Celebration event is scheduled for early April as well. The Economic Development Team has also been providing support for rollout of Play in the Pyrenees series, which is a marketing campaign to encourage visitors to the region. In respect to the state and local economy, the report outlines the projections in respect to population growth, gross regional product, and unemployment and jobs. And Mr. Mayor, that information is there for your awareness and Council's awareness. Also in respect of business counts and business numbers. So in respect, Mr. Mayor, of the grant application for the Enabling Tourism Fund, there is a recommendation there that Council endorses the grant application for the Enabling Tourism Fund and notes the update provided in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Noel. Moved, Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Vance. Councillor Clark, would you like?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to make a couple of comments, they're all very important projects for the Shire. But the other thing I think is really heartening to see in the report is some of the statistics around employment. Although we had a bit of a dip during COVID, we've actually pretty much got back to where we were in the sense of people employed in businesses and those type of things. And that's quite heartening to see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance. I'd like to apologise to my fellow councillors and council officers. I didn't realise that I was in this report as part of the population growth between 2009 and 20 as the two representatives in Avoca. So hopefully that doesn't get me into trouble at some later date. All those in favour? Thank you very much. 13.2.1, Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates. Mr. Gowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to inform Council of the opportunity to benefit from the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates that were secured as a result of upgrading the major streetlights to light-emitting diodes. Council replaced all 80-watt mercury vapour residential streetlights with LEDs 3 years ago as part of a Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance program. Recently, Powergore has completed replacing the major road network with LEDs as a result. And as a result, Council has secured a number of energy certificates. These certificates are similar to the rebate received when installing solar panels. The certificates can be sold on the open market and the price varies depending upon demand. Currently, the price is considerably higher and it would be an ideal time to consider selling. This has also been recommended by the consultant for the lighting project. Council has generated 432 certificates and the current price is around $82 a certificate, which is equivalent to a total of $35,000. The alternative to selling is to hold on to the certificates and use them in the future to potentially offset Council's carbon footprint. Council continues to strive to reduce its carbon footprint. Council could potentially utilise funds from the sale of current certificate holdings to reinvest in further greenhouse gas reductions. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that Council officers proceed with the sale of 432 Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificates resulting from the installation of LED streetlights and that council reinvest these funds in future greenhouse gas reduction projects.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. I have a mover, Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I think it's a credit to the council for showing this initiative and then receiving those certificates. I think that's a really good pat on the back, and it complements the work that's been done. The uncertainty of what might happen if we hold on to those certificates, I think, is a bit of a decision maker in itself, and then if we can realise those into the funds of about $35,000, which we can then put back into doing something more constructive in relation to the greenhouse space. I think it's a really, really good initiative. So, and I'll fully support it. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to reiterate, I think what Councillor Ferrari said, it does seem like a very good price in that sense. And in the context of council's journey, as I understand, we can't particularly use these as a credit at this point in time in council's work. So it makes sense that we would realise the money and actually invest that in something for council. Is that correct, Mr. Howard?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, that is correct. We currently have no need for these certificates. That's not to say that there might not be some future need, but yeah, as the report suggests, that that there is this opportunity to reinvest that money.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I've been interested to hear some of the views that have been put forward with this, whether we should, whether we shouldn't, why we should, why we shouldn't, and it strengthens my belief that we look at things from many, many sides when we're making decisions here at council, and sometimes we wrestle with both sides and then come up with a decision, and this is one of them. All those in favour? Carried. 13.2.2, Waste Management Plan Review. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council endorsement of the Pyrenees Shire Council Waste Management Plan 2021 to 2025. Council's previous waste management plan, dated 2016, has been reviewed, and an updated waste management plan has been developed, incorporating major changes to council's waste and recycling services that were implemented from July last year. In February last year, council committed to a universal shire-wide waste and recycling service to meet changes introduced by the Victorian State Government following a comprehensive community consultation process. The waste management service provided to the community is very visible and involves significant customer contact. It is important for council to define the levels of service it will provide the community in the provision of waste management services. The Pyrenees Shire Council Waste Management Plan provides detail on the services provided in this current year and any improvements planned over the life of the plan. And the objectives of the plan include ensuring that council's waste management services continue to meet community expectations, ensuring that council's waste management services move towards meeting government expectations with its circular economy and 10-year recycling improvement plan, and that the plan includes improvements adopted from council's 2016 review of the municipal waste services. Following the review undertaken, the attached plan includes some actions for council's consideration. And those actions include investigating models council will implement for the inclusion of organic food waste in curbside collection and disposal of green waste. And that is suggested for the 24-25 year. We've had previous concerns from the community around street litter bin hygiene, and therefore it's suggested that a maintenance agreement be entered into this year. And of particular note, there's an action there around reviewing transfer station opening hours following introduction of the mandatory curbside collections to all households in July last year, which may reduce the demand upon transfer stations. And one of the actions here is to undertake that review and provide council some options around what it might do in relation to transfer station opening hours. And that's proposed for this year. There's also the opportunity for transfer station upgrades, and this is funding dependent, and it's projected that we may be eligible for some funding in the next financial year, and therefore the timeframe for that is 2023. Another action is to continue to monitor and improve the percentage of recoverable material from going to landfill, and that's ongoing. And also to investigate and implement methodologies to accurately measure green waste for reporting purposes. Currently, we don't have an accurate monitoring method. And the last action listed there is to advocate for local sites to be accessible for state-introduced container deposit scheme, which is due to commence in 2023. Council's forecast of cost of waste management for the 22-23 financial year is just over $2 million. This cost is passed on to ratepayers through Council's waste charge. The risk of introducing any higher level of service may result in a higher waste charge. Therefore, in conclusion, the reviewed waste management plan provides transparency to the community regarding the levels of service provided and provides future actions to improve this important service. And therefore, is the officer recommendation that Council adopts the Waste Management Plan 22-20-25 and commits to implementing the actions as outlined in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Moved, Councillor Vance. Seconded, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to see eventually that the state government have stepped up to the plate, and we are going to get to the position where cans and bottles can be deposited with councils and a return for the people that bring that particular item in. And it's good to see that it's built into our plan also. I was aware that it was going to be introduced in 2023, and it's good to see that we're going to be shovel ready for when it happens. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, again, it's a very good document in the context of what we've got to do, but we are, as Councillor Vance says, in a bit of a stage of transition in one of those things. And in my dealings with the government, particularly, we've had some quite back and forth around, are we actually going to have 4 bins for every property in Victoria, which we worked out the other day was 3 million properties, about 2 metres worth of bins, about 6,000 kilometres of bins if everybody gets one. So the conversation we've been able to have with the minister has been a little bit more enlightening over the last couple of months, in the sense, and the state is now starting to talk about streams and services rather than actual bins for every person. And as I pointed out to her, my farm is about half the size of the city of St Kilda, the city of Port Phillip, and I really don't need a great green waste service. I can manage my green waste okay, and a bit like we're doing it in a very pragmatic way. So the only thing I would like us to put in the report, and it reflects when it was written, we've written a 4-bin service, whether we can write for a 4-stream service in that sense, if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'm happy to make that adjustment to the report.
And in that, I'm very happy to support this document as a strategy.
Thank
and
you.
It just gives us that flexibility that we're actually already applying, but just gives us, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Anyone else? No. All those in favour? Thank you very much. 13.2.3, Road and Bridge Condition Assessments 2022. Mr. Gowans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to obtain council endorsement for the Maloney Asset Management System methodology and forecasting in undertaking road and bridge condition surveys. The Maloney Asset Management System were engaged in 2010 to undertake condition surveys of council's roads and bridge network. Every 3 years, council is required to complete these asset condition surveys. Council have now completed 4 surveys which allow accurate degradation graphs to be produced for the asset classes involved in the surveys. The 2022 Bridges Condition Survey was undertaken on 27 bridges that were identified out of the 150 bridges that we have that had condition scores of 6 or more from the 2019 survey. As long life assets, the balance of the bridges are assumed to reflect condition change based on age over the intervening 3 years. 27 bridge assets were found to be in a fair to poor overall condition. This overall condition reflects the fact that the worst 27 bridges within the municipality were assessed. The overall condition of all bridges has, nevertheless, improved as a result of the large structure bridge replacements that have occurred during the last 3 years. There remains a backlog of minor improvement work to protect some of these ageing bridges, and predominantly relating to deck sealing and concrete spoil repairs. The report recommends that a load limit be imposed on 4 bridges. Road assets, on the other hand, were found to be in excellent overall condition. The report recommends annual renewal expenditure of $3.15 million over the next 10 years. And the early work that we've been doing in our budget preparation for both this year and for our 10-year financial plan suggests that that level is achievable. Council has a low level of over-intervention assets. The graph in the report shows the change in condition for sealed pavement between this and the 2018 survey, reflecting an overall improvement in condition. The very strong performance in all asset groups since 2019 has been on the back of relatively high levels of external funding. If external funding were to be substantially lowered in future years, Council would need to review its approach to renewal funding on the road and bridge assets. The reports demonstrate that overall, Council is achieving good results in management of road and bridge assets. The report makes recommendations as to the ongoing funding levels for asset renewal in these classes. Therefore, it's the officer recommendation that Council endorse the findings of the Maloney Asset Management Systems for roads and bridges and the associated reports, and that Council supports the continued use of the Maloney Asset Management Systems methodology and financial forecasting, and that Council reflects the report recommendations for funding of asset classes in Council's long-term financial planning.
Thank you, Mr. Gowans. Moved, Councillor Clark, seconded, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. If I could start with a couple of questions, or a question might cover a lot. Mr. Gowans, can you unpack this a little bit more for us, please, in the context of those 3 major asset groups, our sealed roads, our gravel roads, and bridges you've probably already unpacked. But the nice bit I noticed about the bridges, 27 scared me, but at least I saw 20% of them at least are only footbridges. So that's a bit of a win in the sense of things. So,
through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Clark. You're correct that some of our worst bridges are some of our footbridges. Therefore, from a risk point of view, it's a lot lower than a vehicle going through a bridge. However, Council has received some external funding which will be going to address some of those bridges. There's a number of bridges in Beaufort associated with some footpath works and some bridges at the lake that are scheduled to be replaced in the coming financial year. In terms of the elements that make up the Maloney Asset Report, roads have a number of elements to them that are individually assessed based on their life. So the seal on a road has a particular life, and that's approximately 20 years, whereas the pavement underneath the seal has a life of about 70 years. Therefore, those elements, even though they interact with each other, need to be looked at individually. And thankfully, with the Maloney Asset Management Report impacting how we have been funding each of those elements, we're keeping up with the renewal demand, and that's what's shown in the Maloney Asset Management report. But that's reliant on those kind of levels of funding staying at that level going forward. And there are some factors that come into play that do make life a bit difficult going forward. And one of those is CPI rises. So Maloney's report doesn't necessarily factor in CPI rises. So therefore, if CPI rate rises at higher than what we can fund our assets, that starts to become a long-term sustainability issue for council. So, and the good thing is that we do get a report every 3 years, so we can adjust those levels on a three-yearly basis. Even though we've got requirements to have a 10-year long-term financial plan, those projections, it's shown over the last 12 years that we've been able to keep the right levels of funding for each of the elements. The other big element in our road network is our gravel road network, and Maloney's reports show that we're doing very well in keeping up with our renewal demand on gravel road network. However, we know that the customer experience, the residential experience of people is that they want a better gravel road network. So therefore, we can meet our renewal demand, but we've also got another expectation that's around meeting community expectations. And we've made some improvements to our gravel road network in the type of materials that we use. They're far better, more engineered material that lasts longer and provides for the heavier loads that we now experience on our road network. And also our design depth of gravel has increased because it needs to, because we have heavier vehicles going on our road network. And one of the other factors that we need to be aware of is climate change and climate change's effect on our road network. Very dry periods, very wet periods have a big impact on how our network performs.
Thanks, Mr. Gowans. So I think we don't often get the chance to have someone actually have a look at us externally and run the ruler over us to say we've done a good job. And I think this does say we've done a good job. I'll be the first councillor to say we're not out of the woods. We've always got a distance to go with roads, but certainly council has upped its money. We've taken that money from the community's ratepayers. We went for a rate variation a few years ago on the promise that we would put that money into roads. And this report does say that yes, we've done that, and yes, we're delivering some results. So that's really good. I know we've got a fair road to go with bridges, and we've also got a fair road to go with B doubles and things like that, and continue with gravel roads. But certainly the signs are good, and all credit to the officers for the leadership and the work in this space. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance.
Just one question. The 4 bridges that you said that would have to have load limits on them, could you indicate as to where they may be situated?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Councillor Vance, for your question. I can't give you the exact locations. I am aware that some of the bridges that we're doing some further investigation work. I'm aware of some on the Landsborough Elmhurst Road, on the north side of the gap. So there are some ones up there that I'm aware of that we're investigating that may be within that 4. I'd have to check, and I will take that on notice and get back to you with where those 4 are located, because there may be some, even though there's a recommendation in the report for a load limit, there's different levels of bridge inspection. Maloney does a condition inspection, and it's somewhere around a level 2 to 2.5 bridge inspection. When we've got a recommendation for a load limit, we undertake an engineering level 3 inspection, and that provides some greater detail. And sometimes we've found that level 3 inspection, where we do have to pay expert consultants to do some of that work, even with some of the expertise within our team, we have found that there is ways of extending the life of those assets without necessarily having to put the load limit on. So we do take that recommendation seriously, but basically it highlights that we need to do some further work on those particular bridges.
Thank you.
Councillor Vance, it's just been brought to my attention. They are Back Cemetery Road, Beaufort, Carnham.
No, that's the reference point, so it's fine. That's the road.
Yep, Back Cemetery Road, Murramong Road, Pitong Snake Valley Road, and Racecourse Road.
Thank you.
Any other, councillor? The only thing that I would comment on this, and I seriously have a lot of respect for the Maloney system, and I think it's done us a great job over the period that I've been in council. But there are other factors, and CPI was mentioned by Councillor Clark. The cost of building a road does not equate to a loaf of bread and a dozen eggs. So the CPI limitations that's placed on us via the state government of between 1% and 2% has no reference whatsoever in the amount of money we spend to keep these roads in the conditions. So limitations imposed by state governments in regards to rates and so forth have a serious impact on our abilities in some instances to be able to deliver the roads that our ratepayers request. And that will be an ongoing thing into the future if we continue to have higher CPI and low rate capping. Councillors, all those in favour? Thank you. 13.3.1, naming of the Evoca hubs. Martin Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek Council's approval to move into the public consultation phase for the naming of, for the proposed naming of 2 council properties in Evoca. Council received government funding to develop 2 hubs in Evoca. Firstly, the refurbishment of the old Shire offices next to the Evoca Shire Hall, with a view to using the facility as a community hub or for a business. And secondly, the setting up of a digital hub at the rear of the Evoca Information Centre, with a view to using the facility as a technology space, including for small and start-up businesses. The facilities will be available for use by the community and business soon, as they've now been completed. Section 2.3.3 of the Pyrenees Shire Council's Reconciliation Plan 2021 to 2024 commits council to explore opportunities to advocate for the naming of new sites and dual naming existing significant sites within the Pyrenees Shire to include traditional language place names. Names considered appropriate for the type of facility were explored, and approval was sought from the Jaja Wurrung Clans Aboriginal Corporation for the following names to be used. And excuse me, councillors, if I actually mispronounce these names because they're new to me. The first one is Gunga, and the English translation is to work, to create, to make something. Warika, the English translation is to yarn, to talk, and Balaki Wuka is giving, the translation is giving to the community. The Director of Corporate Services has outlined a bit of a consultation process. So ultimately, at the end of any consultation process, a report would come back to council for a decision. The Director, Corporate and Community Services has actually made a recommendation that council give in principle approval for names for the refurbished community facilities in Evoca.
Thank you, Martin. Councillors, do I have a mover? Move Councillor Vance, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Vance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a process that we've got to go through, and to go out to the community and gain approval is part of the process. So it's quite easy to support the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, and I second Councillor Vansett, but I do think it's an exciting opportunity too to have these community facilities, so it's a great time to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's a really interesting thing to be looking at in this context, because we've just had a presentation this afternoon about the Goldfields World Heritage area, and if you kind of think about some of that locality stuff and you think about Beaufort and Waterloo, well, you can obviously work out there's a fair bit of French around when the Goldfields was being settled. If you're talking about Bungbong or Homebush, you can go, oh yeah, I can make a bit of a link to what that's about what happened here in the bush and that kind of thing. But the one bit we don't really have very much of is that Indigenous heritage. It's not very well recognised, and this is one of the things that council can do, and a really positive thing that council can do, in terms of actually giving those names prominence and bringing those names back into community and having people talk about those names commonly. And, you know, I just looked next door to the Brimpo Centre, which has been really well regarded, and those kind of things. So, yeah, great initiative by council officers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I was just about to mention, you beat me to it.
Sorry.
Yes, I think, I mean, I was terribly adventurous when I nominated as the Voca Hall Hub. So I certainly support the local names from the point of view of inclusion. I think that's a great move. All those in favour? Carried. 13.3.2 Library Outreach Program. Mr. Walmsley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this report is to update Council and its community on the forthcoming expansion of the Pyrenees Shire Council's mobile library outreach program. Councillors will recall that on the 14th of December last year, we had the official launch of the mobile library van by Danielle Green, MLA Parliamentary Secretary for Regional Victoria, representatives from the Department of Jobs, precincts and regions, and our Mayor Councillor Eason. It's proposed to increase the service delivery of this wonderful service, which our residents haven't really had access to prior, apart from a vehicle-based service, which was fairly limited. But we're planning to provide a lot more. We're planning to provide a lot more service delivery to some of our other more rural communities. The report provided by the Director of Corporate Community Services actually refers to this commencing at the start of the 2022 year, which is actually well and truly started. So the recommendation will actually be that the revised service commence at the start of term 2, which will give us adequate time to promote the service. But I think this is a wonderful initiative for communities.
Thank you, Mr. Walmsley. Councillors, do I have Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Clark?
Again, I would just like to thank everyone that's been involved in that, and it's been wonderful to get the grant to be able to get such a great resource. And I know it's well used in our area, which gives that access to people who wouldn't have that in places like Snake Valley. And as the report said, being able to reach those housebound people, particularly as we're coming out of COVID and we're really trying to connect our community, this physically does it in such a fantastic way. So it's been terrific. So thank you to Martin and the whole team.
Any other councillors? All those in favour? Carried. 13.4.1, the Old Beaufort Primary School. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider this matter around the Old Beaufort Primary School following a submission that was made by the committee tonight and the overwhelming support that was evidenced by by the community through the survey that was sort of submitted. So what this report does is it just summarises some of the past decisions of the council so that it provides some context. And I just referenced a couple of those commitments that council have already given in respect to this property, and particularly the resolution in December 2019, where council, as item 6 there, council seeks to purchase the open space land described as 3 and 4 in the report for community purposes. So that's the open space area, the low-lying area. So council has previously committed to seek to be the owner of that land. And then also further in March of 2020 that council supports the community desire that the state provide a former Beaufort Primary School site for community purposes into the future. So all of that is consistent with some of the outcomes of the community petition that's just recently been received by council. And therefore, as a result, there is a recommendation, and this is consistent with Ms. Hedges' report tonight, where there was a commitment by the group to establish working parties, a working party to investigate a youth space, a working party to investigate the management structure, and to establish a maintenance fund. So all of that work needs to be done, and it is recommended that council continues to support that desire of the community. And the recommendation is that council continues to support the community in its petition to the state government.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Moved Councillor Ferrari, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank the committee for their presentation to the council earlier on. Whilst it's clear that the community are very supportive of this facility as a community hub, it needs to be further explored, as Philippa explained, about what the management structure for the facility looks like, how it operates, and what role the council may play in this. And that's something that needs to be explored in the future, as Philippa alluded to. I have to commend the committee for their resilience and their adaptability in making changes in response to their pathway forward and the expectations of the community. They have been very patient and dedicated, and I thank them for that. This has been not just happening recently, it's been going on for in excess of 7 years, and that is very, very hard to maintain and be sustainable and to keep moving forward with that positivity. So I can't commend them enough on their dedication and their patience and their resilience that they've showed in that endeavour. I've been heavily involved with a lot of the discussions and the meetings around this, and I strongly believe that the facility, including the Oval, can be an excellent and effective community hub and also provide a vital space for our youth to undertake some vocational training, explore opportunities, have a place where they feel safe and wanted, and to be connected to the community. And that's something that, you know, we should be trying to provide as a matter of course, rather than having to go out and find it. But it's a work in progress. We are all aware of it and we're working towards it, and that's what's important. It's a place to give them a voice, and as Sharon Roxburgh alluded to, you know, with that 16-year-old saying what they need is headspace. So we need to hear that. We need to hear from those youth and give them the opportunity to be somewhere in a facility, an environment where they feel safe to say these things, to tell us these things, so we can go out and make things happen for them, because they need that voice. They need to feel safe. They need to feel confident to be able to tell us that. And I think this facility could be really that place. They need a place that matters. And I feel this is an excellent opportunity to give them that place. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to absolutely second everything that Councillor Vance has mentioned, and having had a few meetings as well, one-on-one with the committee, understand the extensive work and the planning and the foresight that's gone into this project. I think too, I can absolutely second the headspace, having experienced a session that the high school ran only last week, to look at the impact that it had just on the group of students that I was supervising is incredibly important. And we know this as a regional community, that we need these spaces for our youth. And it's just to have this opportunity right here, right now, it's just an absolute no-brainer that we're able to support this group, and the community's commitment and support also just show just how much this is a loved project, and hopefully one that will go ahead really effectively with that planning and with that support, however that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keenan. Any other? Couple of things. I appreciate the submission placed before us this evening. There was a interesting discussion in there with Daniela Green commenting on it in the Parliament about how great it'd be as a community asset. I think that's a major step along the way to actually get that spoken in the Legislative Assembly. She's in the Assembly of Council. I think she's Assembly. She's in the Assembly. And secondly, when Sharon made the comment about the young 16-year-old discussing headspace, I've been fortunate since being on council to have had a number of interactions with the younger generation around that age, 16, 17, late secondary school children. And I've never been disappointed with a lot of the things that they've brought up. I might not have agreed with them, but they certainly have their own mind. They certainly understand what the world is today, and we do not support them at our own peril. They need our support, and I hope that we can give it to them better than we may have done in years gone by. Councillors, all those in favour? Carried. 13.4.2, Advocacy 2022 Federal Election Campaign. Mr. Nolan, we're off and running.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to support an advocacy campaign by the Australian Local Government Association, otherwise known as ALGA, in the lead up to the 2022 federal election. The election is planned for May, was expected to be held in May 2022, and ALGA have been working hard as a peak body to represent local governments across Australia, and the issues that affect each of those local LGAs. The campaign, which is titled "Don't Leave Local Communities Behind," is outlined in this report, and I've actually really just provided a summary of some of the elements in that. What's of particular interest is the economic recovery and a number of recommendations around economic recovery relating to the financial assistance grants. And of course, this is a major funding source for Pyrenees Shire Council. And one of the commitments that's sought is 1% of Commonwealth taxation revenue via a phased approach to ensure that fundamental assistance is provided to local LGAs. It also recommends a 4-year continuation of the Local Roads and Community Infrastructure Program. This is a program that was a stimulus program associated with COVID recovery, and which there's been 3 rounds of that program already implemented. The campaign also recommends a strategic local roads investment program of $300 million per annum over 4 years. It recommends increasing the roads to recovery by an additional $300 million per annum, and the black spot program of $200 million over 4 years. And it also recommends continuing the stronger regional digital connectivity package of $55 million over 4 years, and to implement an innovative housing partnership. So they're the recommendations around economic recovery, which are really sort of central and important to the Pyrenees Shire. Apart from that, there's a range of recommendations around building resilience, around the circular economy, around intergovernmental relations. And I won't read them out, there's too many to read, Mr. Mayor, but there are issues that impact on all the LGAs, and it's really important and appropriate that Pyrenees, as a small rural council, which for all intents and purposes is under financial stress and the risk of becoming unsustainable without direct funding and increased direct funding from the Commonwealth. In addition to those issues that affect all LGAs, there are some issues and projects that are specific to Pyrenees. And the rest of the report actually talks to a number of those projects. And this is not an exhaustive list of projects, but they're projects for which council might reasonably seek assistance from the Commonwealth Government. The Beaufort Caravan Park Rejuvenation Project is one of those, and council has lodged a $1 million funding application through the Building Better Regions Fund, and that's one that we'll continue to advocate for. I recommend continuing to advocate to the Commonwealth for that funding to be provided. The power and lighting upgrades for our community reserves. This is approximately a $4 million project. And it's seeking an appropriate level of power and lighting for our recreation facilities to be properly utilised by our communities. If you travel to regional centres, you see, some fantastic facilities and extremely well lit and no apparent power shortfalls. One can't help but wish the same for our communities in Pyrenees. The Beaufort-Carnham Road Bridge 10 is a significant infrastructure issue. We heard Mr. Gowans talk about some of the challenges around our bridges in the earlier part of the meeting. Well, this project is going to require significant funding from the Commonwealth. It's a project of about $1.4 million, and the Bridges Renewal Program is one of those programs that would assist in that bridge being delivered. So again, this takes advocacy and effort to continue to advocate for that program to be available and for that project to be funded. The Moonabel Water Project is one that council has long advocated for, and it's one that, in the context of a new federal election, that some commitment and undertaking from the Commonwealth in respect to that project is one that is timely. Strengthening, making Beaufort bypass ready. Community be aware of recent advice from Regional Roads Victoria about the release of the environmental effects statement associated with the Beaufort bypass in the coming weeks. And there'll be a great deal of community interest in that document and in ensuring that the impacts of the bypass on Beaufort are well understood and articulated. And to mitigate those impacts, it suggested councillors that there be ongoing advocacy to strengthen Beaufort to best respond to its future as a destination town. In Avoca, there are a number of specific activities in Beaufort that fit in Avoca that fit as an Activate Avoca project. The Streetscape project that was endorsed previously by council is not complete yet. There's further work to be done there. The centre around the rail precinct, which is being utilised for arts and events and activities, requires significant investment into the future. These are just two elements of activating Avoca. And of course, project 7 that's listed in this report relates to community halls. There are numerous community halls, as council well appreciates, across the whole of the Shire. Many of these halls council visits as part of its community cuppa activities. I think it was in February that council visited Trawalla for a community cuppa, and the Trawalla community identified a range of improvements that are necessary to that hall to improve its functionality and make it more usable from a community perspective. So many of these community halls require desperate need of renewal and improvements. These are just some of the projects that council could consider advocating to federal government. It's not an exhaustive list, councillors, but they're there for your endorsement. And the recommendation that sits with this report, councillors, is that council supports the national funding priorities of the Australian Local Government Association, which would contribute an estimate of $6.46 billion a year to the Australian GDP and create 43,444 jobs. And 2, agrees to support and participate in the Australian Local Government Association's advocacy for their endorsed national funding priorities by writing to the local federal members of Parliament, all known election candidates in local federal electorates, and the President of the Australian Local Government Association to A, express support for ALGA's funding priorities, B, to identify local priority projects and projects that could be progressed with additional financial assistance, including a number of those that are mentioned within this report, and C, to seek funding commitments from the members and candidates and their parties for these identified local projects and programs, including those described in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, do I have a moved? Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Keogh. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Nolan's given a very, very comprehensive coverage of a number of issues. And this is the key in the campaign for us as councillors, as it is for the CEO, is to actually now talk projects with our politicians and our aspiring politicians and say, if you support this program, this is what you'll get in Pyrenees, for this is what you'll get in Ararat, that kind of thing. And I don't want to add any more to that narrative in that sense than to say there's perhaps one more we want to think about. And I'm not sure I've got my figures exactly correct, but there was a report this week into natural disaster funding from the state, from the federal government. And I'm pretty sure that the figures were that we spend 3% of the money before the disaster, we spend 97% of the money after. And it might be wrong, but I think it's at least 90% we spend after. And I think back to our experience as council of the money we spent after the 10-11 floods and the money we saved after the 2016 floods by investing wisely and doing the right thing and making sure we built the assets better in that sense. I think that's another conversation to add to the list when we're talking to the politicians.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Any other councillor? I think with the federal government about to have the budget come down and expectedly to call an election not long after, I think we need to be out there representing our patch of Australia, and this is the first start of that. We've been speaking to various politicians and the like in the state. That will come later in the year, but certainly we need to be out there trying to win as much support as we can financially for our Shire. Councillors, all those in favour? Carried. 14.4.3, Regional Telecommunication Review. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to inform council about a recently completed regional telecommunications review and to advocate for improved telecommunications. The Regional Telecommunications Review was completed in December 2021 by an independent review committee and reported to the Australian Government. The committee identified a step change in the demand for telecommunications, which warrants a step change in policies and programs which support the delivery of telecommunication services in rural and regional Australia. A copy of the review is attached to the documentation for councillors to read in detail, but what's provided within the report is essentially a summary of those key findings that identified in the report. The first of those is the patchwork quilt of connectivity that was identified. And I'll just make mention of a couple of these so that the community can get a bit of a flavour of what this report is talking about. Key finding identified increased coordination and investment between Australia, state, territory governments is needed to address a patchwork quilt approach to connectivity in the regions. Local councils and other regional stakeholders are increasingly expected to facilitate telecommunication service delivery, but are not appropriately resourced to identify connectivity needs and support the development of suitable solutions. Supply side issues, including backbone fibre and spectrum access, are barriers to competition and innovation in regional telecommunications markets. So, councillors, you get the flavour of this report. It's identifying that there is a strong need for telecommunications. Local councils don't have the resources to be able to identify and deliver on these things, and there are strong community expectations. There are a number of other key findings that relate to the reliability, resilience and redundancy of service. There are findings in respect of the demand for data, the changing community expectations and the needs for a growing economy, the connectivity literacy and digital inclusion, and the importance of ensuring that our rural and regional communities are not left behind. So further to that report, and essentially that report is talking about internet connectivity. In respect to specific telecommunication proposals for Pyrenees, and in respect of internet connectivity, council officers have been working with NBN Co to develop proposals for improved internet access in communities in Pyrenees. And this work has principally involved the communities of Moonambell and Lexton, where identified needs have been identified and business proposals have been worked up. The case for Lexton has been identified as being a stronger case in our work with NBN Co, and a proposal has been submitted for Commonwealth funding with a co-contribution from the state government, which at this stage is not committed. And council officers have continued to work with NBN Co to continue to provide opportunities for that investment by the Commonwealth and the state. In respect of the Mobile Black Spot Funding Program, this is another Commonwealth fund which Pyrenees and Central Highlands Councils Victoria have long advocated. And after 5 rounds of that fund, a number of mobile base stations have been constructed in the towns at Landsborough West, Landsborough, Moonambell, Amphitheatre, Walborough, Lexton and Meena Park. And a further round of this funding is underway. And a site in the vicinity of Yellowhite and the Stoneleigh area, in the vicinity of the Larkpool Grain Receival Centre, has been put forward as a priority location for a future base station to improve mobile connectivity. But that is by no means an exhaustive list, and there are still many areas within the Pyrenees Shire that have mobile black spots. So councillors, the purpose of this report is to bring this to your attention, and there's a recommendation that council notes the 2021 Regional Telecommunications Review findings and continues to advocate for improved internet access and mobile phone coverage for communities across our shire.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, I have a mover, Councillor Keogh, seconded, Councillor Vance. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you. All I would like to say on that one is this is such an important thing. This is why we keep our community safe, and we need to be able to provide this. And again, it's not an exhaustive list, but I think this is a great step forward. So thank you for that report.
Thank you, Councillor Finn. Councillor Vance.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, the only concern I have is with NBN and I will come out and say it. I believe it is ridiculous to think that you can include Waterloo and Chute and Evansford with Lexington, but you can't include Redbank and the surrounding areas with Moonambell, which contain the majority of our vineyards, apart from Avoca. I believe Avoca is just about as close to Moonambell as what Waterloo is to Lexington. So if you want to work on figures, let's include Avoca in with Moonambell to get the numbers up, and Redbank. Our major industries are in Moonambell when it comes to wine production. No denying that. And those companies that are based there are working under sufferance. And we've got to do everything we can to make sure that we don't lose those industries in the Pyrenees Shire. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Councillors? I concur, Councillor Vance. This is an important thing in any rural community. Ours is no different to many, many others across Victoria and Australia. And we need to do whatever we can to try and improve the connectivity within our region and keep pushing as hard as we can to get that improvement. So, councillors, all those in favour? Carried. Councillor reports. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Had the councillor cuppers and council briefing, and went up to the Beaufort Bowls Club for the centenary celebrations and the opening of the new synthetic green, and it's come up fantastic, and they've done some work that's complemented that, and it was a really good day. And I did see the mayor put down a couple of bowls, and I was quite impressed with how good he didn't, and then he sprung up and put another couple of bowls down. So well done, Mr Mayor. Had quite a few meetings with BPS 60 and Louise Staley and Martha Haylett in relation to the old primary school, which we've talked about today. Probably one thing I did neglect to mention is that apart from the community hub, the Oval, as we've already spoke about as councillors and agreed that, you know, that's going to be a very, very vital green space in Beaufort in years to come, if not now, and particularly if we get bypassed. So, you know, there's more discussion to be had about that, but that is certainly a really, really important space for us. Attended the Beaufort Football Netball Club truck and car show, and unfortunately they had the inclement weather again, and that's 2 years in a row, but it didn't deter them. They soldiered on, and it was really, really well attended, and they just kept on with it. And probably the old cars stuff was down a little bit because people are very precious about their cars and bringing them out in the weather, which is understandable. The truck part was up, but I was really, really impressed with the turn up and the way that the organisers of the event just soldiered on with it, and it was a really, really great success. So it's a credit to them, considering they started that all from nothing. It was a new initiative, and it's just gone on to bigger and better things. So well done to them. Had some meetings with B4B, including a strategic planning session. They've gone away with their head spinning a little bit, but certainly got some ideas about how to move forward and structure their planning for the future. And of course, a number of conversations with constituents around about a variety of things. So that's about it for me, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I guess the main meeting that I've attended in the last little part has been our MEMC meeting. So a lot of that, the reports there came from mostly from CFA activities over the fire season, and other groups, of course, represented, still working through COVID impacts on community and those sorts of things. So one particular concern that our Director Doug Gowans was able to highlight too was looking at our roadside slashing program. So council is conducting assessments on this program to make this as effective as possible and to meet those needs to protect our community. That's a huge thing for across our shire, but particularly in the southern area where there's heavier vegetation and things that occur at this time when we do have the fire season. I think it's so important again to thank our CFA. I know we do this a lot, but we cannot do it enough. For a season that we thought, I remember an earlier MEMC where we thought the season was going to be quieter, or at least a bit later. It did become a little bit more busy, or a lot busy at one stage. So a huge thanks to all our amazing CFA volunteers and trucks that had to get out to multiple burns, and they managed that beautifully to protect our community. So again, huge thank you to all you CFA volunteers. Councillor Ferrari did mention too that we got down to Caringbellic for a community cuppa the last couple of weeks. It was great to get down there. We didn't have a huge turn up, but we don't go there for popularity. We go to all parts of our shire to show that we're here representing everyone. And it was great to see some great highlights down in that area at the Caringbellic Hall, but also to hear areas that we still want to work on to be there for all our constituents across our shire. So that's been wonderful. There was mention of the library van. Again, I just want to say that's just another fantastic resource that we've got for our part of the shire. And again, that gets out to those people, and we work so hard to be able to do that. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I do, just in light of what's been happening over the last few months, and travelling around our beautiful shire, I just wanted to note just how lucky we are and how fortunate we are to live where we live in light of what's happening globally and our brothers and sisters in Ukraine and what they're having to go through, and others on all sides of war. It's just, we're so fortunate, and I think it's really important sometimes to sit and reflect on what we do have and be very thankful. In light of that too, our thoughts go out to our fellow Australians in those flooded areas. We've just alluded to funding that and times when we've needed that support, and I think it's really important that we're able to be there to give that emotional support, but also the physical support where we possibly can at this difficult time. So just sending thoughts out to them, really. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just with my MOV hat on, firstly, a couple of weeks ago, we had a little win with the government about a rate exemption. And while that wasn't going to affect Pyrenees at that point in time, and the effect for us was about $25,000, the legislation the government proposed to pass was that they would actually put all councils into the rate exemption and they would exempt us, which meant by the stroke of the pen we were exempted, but by the stroke of the pen we could have been back in. So although it was a little far away, it wasn't actually very much that far away in that sense of things. So that was a very nice win for the sector, and just showed that if you talk to us and have a conversation rather than spring it on us, there's a chance we can actually work something out. Anyway, the other one I just wanted to mention is, of course, we're all very aware of the floods in New South Wales and Queensland, and we're certainly talking through the emergency services channels in both states as to whether there's anything that local government can do in Victoria. At this stage, they're very much just dealing with it and moving into recovery at that stage. And certainly our advice at the moment to councils and communities is use your existing channels for support, whether it's Red Cross, whether it's Rotary here in Ballarat that are doing a heap of work around feed for animals, whether it's buy a bale or those types of things. They're doing direct things and they've got links, and you can get something directly into those communities through those means at the moment. In terms of council stuff, both my organisations are represents council on the LEN and CVGA have met, both of them. In terms of the LEN, we're actually just coming up for 20 years, which I find a bit hard to believe because I was actually here when we started, and that's probably a bit of an indictment on me as the councillor in that sense. And in CVGA, of course, last week we farewelled Rob Law as our executive officer after 4 years. And Rob's going back to domestic life, and his wife's going out to work, and he's looking after the kids, and he's going to find that really interesting. But he's actually not that far away. But He's been really good for all the 13 councillors in CVJ, and certainly to us at Pyrenees. He's been a great friend and ally, and helped us get some significant amounts of money. You know, the work Douglas was talking about with the lights and those things. So that's been really good. I had a very, very pleasant afternoon at the Raglan Hall. After 3 attempts, we finally had the afternoon tea to celebrate the hall, and I actually expected to get there and find about another 3 things done because it's been that long. But the amount of work that they've put in, absolute hail to that community for the work they've done, and I said to them, you have bugged me relentlessly, and good luck to you because it's delivered. You know, they need a little bit more money from us. They've got a bit of money from the wind company. They got more money from grants from the state. And they've actually now got the whole thing platted, and they're now on the next lot of projects, which is putting a patio on outside and things like that. But it really does look $1 million. I mean, I think back to when we did the 3 halls project there when I was the mayor, I think in 2018, and we walked into the building and said, we want to do this and this, but we can't actually do that till we do the floor. And oh my God, we can't do the floor till we do the stumps, because you could actually you can almost swim in the hole. It was like in the dip that was in the middle of the floor. It really is a fantastic project, and an absolute credit to council for sticking with that community and helping them deliver that. Danielle Green was there on the day, and I certainly made significant mention that you're a great friend of council in that context. And Danielle, of course, has just been here the week before for the library van, and we've just been talking about her again tonight in terms of BP60 and the old primary school. So again, she's a good ally and someone that we want to work with as much as we can. The federal election we've talked about, and the only other one, Mr. Mayor, I just want to mention is, of course, not this weekend, the weekend before, the Stop AusNet Towers groups had a series of meetings across the length of that line. Waubra was the most westerly one of that. They said Waubra was the last meeting. By the time they got to Waubra, they said they'd had about 1,000 people over the 6 meetings. In that sense, I went to Kingston as well, which is middle of Hepburn Shire, about 150 people there. Waubra was much more subdued. Waubra was about 30 people. But there's no doubt that there is certainly some angst and some issues among members of our community. And as always, council will continue to listen to those people. The 2 things that we've talked about quite specifically is about actually allowing the Stop AusNet Towers group to come and brief council. And I think that's a really good initiative if we can organise that fairly soon. And whether we can help the community a little bit in a technical sense with actually making a submission to the EES process, so they can actually feel like they're giving something of quality to that process and enhancing that process. And I think after that, then council's in a position where it can actually do some further consideration of this matter. So I think that's certainly something I think most councillors are aware of, that we need to do that in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a Timber Towns meeting on the 17th of February. Quite a very interesting and long meeting. Some things that come out of it, the state government are not very popular with the timber industry, as we're all aware, with the closing of the forests in Gippsland and Central Victoria, including our own forest. And on Christmas Eve, the Minister Lily D'Ambrosio announced that they were going to remove the coops in West Gippsland from the Vic Forest Group and shut them out. So the protesters had had a win, and she also announced that there'd be no costs over the court case against the protesters. So that really put the skids under the West Gippsland area, in Hayfield area especially, where the paper mills are. And as a consequence of that, 3 councils, Wellington, East Gippsland and the Latrobe councils, were getting together with Darren Chester, David O'Brien, Tim Bull and Bridget McKenzie to discuss the issue, to see if they couldn't get some turnaround. But at the moment, our timber industry is really getting flogged by our current state government. As a consequence of closing those forests up, they have a massive carbon credits win. It has, what come out of the meeting was that they were at $16, the carbon credits. I've written down here $60, but I hear today perhaps they were only $35. But it's a
No, it's a bit. I think it's a bit more than that. Our total was 35,000, but I think the market price was about $82.
$82. Will you work it out for yourself? When you take in the whole area of forest, they've closed up. Carbon credits for state government is just an absolute massive win. And the comment that come out of the result of closing the forest is that we're importing timber now from offshore and we're exporting smoke every time there's a bushfire that runs through our forests that are closed up. So it's a pretty wise move. I'm not sure it is. And the other comment that I did raise with our manager for assets and infrastructure is maybe we could claim carbon credits on all the timber along the roads. So seeing as the government can use the forest to get carbon credits, is it possible to use our opportunity? But it seems that's not the case. On the 28th of February, we had an RCV meeting, and unfortunately we've lost another member from our board. Councillor O'Connor from the North East has resigned. She stood down as a councillor, so immediately she has to resign from the committee. So there has to be a replacement there. We had an address from Brooke Cherfels, who represented Royal Life Saving Society. And if you remember at our last council meeting, I mentioned that there was a possibility that council would have a responsibility for all waterways. And it seems that this is not the case. That was only a recommendation from Royal Life Saving. It's still got to be assessed. And at the end of the meeting, we decided that the feedback that I was given anyway is that that's not going to happen, which is some relief for us. Just relating back to the Timber Towns meeting also, there has been a company appointed to do a tyres study, and we hope to have the results ready by the end of June for the upcoming state election. And I've already mentioned it to our manager of assets and infrastructure to give our details through on that one. The RDV have approved a grant of 500,000 for Rural Councils Victoria, which has to be expended by the 30th of June this year. So the skates are out, I can tell you. Everything is, but we have been doing quite a few programs, and it's just a matter of getting the sign-offs on those. It has been mentioned today, but it was mentioned at the meeting that there would be a federal election in early May. I, like all other councillors, had our Caramballic meeting. I, with a cuppa, which was very informative. I chaired an AGM for the Glenpatrick Reserve last Saturday morning, and with a little bit of coercion on a property just not too far away, we had a quorum. It was a bit difficult raising the quorum in the first place because unfortunately the secretary had gone down with COVID, and that put a bit of pressure on Colin Wells, who had to do a quick run around to get the numbers up, but we got there. I'd like to reiterate Councillor Keogh's comments about the flood victims in New South Wales and the terrible situation in Europe. My mind just floats when I think about what's happening with the Russians and the Ukrainian people. Terrible. And last but not least, on my way into town today, I had a few minutes to spare, and I took a drive up into Correa Park and took the opportunity to have a look at the proposed area for my mate up on the wall up there, Councillor O'Connor, who's the intention is to name the park after him. And I was just wondering where we were at with that situation. The area is nicely presented. I noticed some trees and shrubs had been planted and a couple of seats positioned around, and it's a great attribute. And I think we ought to get on and take the necessary process to have it open. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Mr. Nunn.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Vance, for your comment there. And as you noted, some of the infrastructure is in place there to create a little park environment in honour of former Councillor O'Connor. And just like to thank Jane and Jade for their work in just facilitating some of that work. And there's been some engagement with Judy O'Connor in the preparation of a sign that's to be installed there as well. And once the sign is sort of ready and installed, we'll be able to unveil it and have a little ceremony there. And there has been some engagement with the family over that. So we hope to do that in the coming months, coming weeks. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. A couple of things mentioned I agree wholeheartedly with. We are damn lucky where we live when you look at what's going on around elsewhere, but we aren't immune to natural disasters, so we should be preparing for them as much as we can. And the timber, I was speaking to someone only over the weekend who was telling me his son is building a house interstate somewhere, I can't remember where, and the timber is coming from Germany. And anybody trying to buy timber of late knows exactly that. Unreal. We've started our discussions with various politicians, federal and state, and aspiring politicians. So yes, the starting gun may not have been fired yet, but people are running. So we're making every effort to talk to people about whatever we can put out there in front of them and get some promises if that's possible. I did attend the Bowls centenary, and yes, I did put down a couple of bowls, and as a bowler, I'm an extremely good footballer and I can't kick. So my partner and my opposition on the green were very, very nice people who looked after me beautifully. During the last week, 2 weeks, I attended a meeting in the Avoca Town Hall proposed by the Avoca Primary School. And it was to do with cyber safety. Now, the cyber safety, particularly of our children. And there were some really, really harrowing things mentioned. The cyber expert, Miss Susan McLean, is one of Australia's leading experts on cyber security for the national government. And she asked a number of questions of the children in grades 3 to 6 in the afternoon, and the answers provided showed that these kids who are not 13 were all using TikTok and using various Instagrams and whatever. And theoretically, legally, they're not old enough to be able to use them, which means how do we know who they're talking to, what they're talking about, and so forth. And she ran with the school organising. She ran a session for adults during the evening, which is what I attended. And the stories became a little bit more harrowing, I believe. And I was certainly horrified at what I heard, at how children so easily can become led by people of any age pretending to be 14 and 15 and talking to our children without their parents' awareness in a lot of instances, and the circumstances that leads to are just horrifying. some of those children are scarred for life after some of the things that happen. So if anybody out there is listening, please be aware of what your children are doing on their devices, who they're involved with, and try and support them as much as you possibly can to make the right choices, because it's so easy to get led away with the wrong choices. And that lady's name is Susan McLean. You can look her up on her website and get some information about that. But our children are far, far too precious. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I think she was on radio, ABC Radio this morning, I think saying she's got a session in Ballarat next month and I think one in Maryborough in May. So we should follow those up and make sure we publicise them.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's about all for me. Now, confidential items. Yes. Can I have a motion to move Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Ferrari, to move into closed council for the awarding of a contract for one of our bridges? Councillors, all those in favour? Carried. Thank you very much. Mr Kirstenos, if you'd like to vacate the room, please. And
I can take it here.
and wait outside if you wish to come back after the closed council meeting.
Look, I've enjoyed it. I'm an interested Pyrenees Shire person, not just a Beaufort person. But I appreciate the comments made by Councillor Ferrari and Councillor Teo. Another example of magnificent ex-students at Beaufort High School. So, look, and I do thank Council for its support and particularly for listening to very hard-working ex-students at Beaufort Primary School.
Thank you, George. Much appreciated.
Please don't forget my invitation.
You will hear from me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, George.
Thanks, George. Are we still streaming? We are.